here. Sorry, guys. I was talking. I forgot to unmute it. I was saying hello, everyone. Welcome to Torah L'chaim. Great to see so many of you. God bless the chat that you can tell me that there was no sound. Yeah, there was nothing wrong with the sound except that my microphone was muted. That's it. My microphone was muted. It's not muted anymore. So now hopefully you can hear me. So welcome Priscilla, welcome Jerome, welcome Karen, welcome Marinazen. Who else is here? Please let me know if you have access to the chat. I would like to know who's on the other side. And yeah, remember my name is right there. I'm Rabbi Anibal, spiritual leader of Congregation Shari Zedek. I've been teaching Torah L'chaim since forever. David Stern is here. Welcome. Welcome to the class. Peter Petrenko, welcome. Yeah, I would say I was teaching this forever. I remember when I came from Chile 20 years ago. Can you believe it? 20 years ago. I realized that there was no Torah class, no weekly Torah class. And I remember talking to Rabbi Green. And I said, there is no Torah class. And he said, okay, go do it. I said, okay, I don't think I have the English to do it. But as soon as I had a little bit, so I started this class, I never stopped. Holly Mandelkorn, welcome from Florida. Please don't tell me the temperature or you are going to make me cry. It's very cold in Winnipeg. It was minus 51 Celsius overnight. And if you speak in Fahrenheit, doesn't matter because at that temperature, Fahrenheit and Celsius are the same. So it was insane overnight, and it's still cold outside, I believe. One of the blessings of working from home is I don't need to know how cold it is outside. I have my nice and warm studio in the basement, and I've been teaching and going from meeting to meeting all morning. So for me, the temperature is ideal. This is Winnipeg in the winter. What can we do? What can we do? Nothing. We can study Torah. And that's exactly what we are going to do today. We have a great Parsha this week. Parsha Teruma. Teruma means offering. But it's a offering, a money offering, not an offering for the altar, like a sacrifice. No, Teruma is an offering with money to the sanctuary back in the time of the Exodus. And then it became an offering with money to the temple once Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem, right? And we're going to see that it was an amazing fundraising that they did. It was really, really something, to the point that something very interesting happened, and is that Moses had to say to the people of Israel, stop bringing money because we have enough. Have you ever heard something like that before? Not me. I've never heard anything like that. Never, ever. But this is what the Parsha says that happened. So I believe them. But there is something else here that I want to say before we even start with the class. And is the progression. 3 weeks in a row, we have 3 topics that they are connected. Let's try to recap what happened here. 3 weeks ago, the 10 Commandments and the revelation from Sinai. Karen Farkas. Let me see what you say here. It says you never heard, especially not from a Jewish institution. Yeah, we do fundraisings all the time, and we are always a little bit short. And then we have to play our magic to try to do the best we can with the money that we raise. But yeah, that's not the case here in the Torah. But hey, we read the Torah for inspiration. It's supposed to give us hope. Nothing better than that. You see, we have a precedent when generosity was at its peak. And they got so much money for the temple that they didn't know what to do with it. Who knows? Maybe we can do it again. But let's recap again. 3 weeks ago, revelation on Sinai, which you can't go more spiritual than that. It's the only time in history, and in fact, this is sometimes theologians study this phenomenon and compare it with other religions, the fact that you have the whole population of Israel, everybody who left Egypt, everybody as a group experienced the revelation from God. It's never like that. It's usually God talking to one prophet and the prophet talking to the people, but the people never had the actual connection with the God, right? This is different. It says that the entire people, the entire nation of Israel, they had this spiritual experience of listening to the voice of God. Unique, but my point is very intense spiritual experience. Okay, so far so good. 1 week after, which was the past week, Parshat Mishpatim. Mishpatim means ordinances or laws. And they were just laws given by God to the people of Israel, but to regulate interactions between human beings. They were laws intended to help the Israelites to create just and prosperous societies. We all know that a society without a law, right, without rules, is doomed to fail. It's doomed to fail. It will be great if we can leave it up to everybody to do what they know is right, but it doesn't work that way. We need certain order. So Parshat Mishpatim, not necessarily the most spiritual experience. Not at all. Everything is about our relationship with people. Okay? But this week's Parsha brings a different concept. It's God saying to the people of Israel, if you found meaning into that spiritual experience, and if you found meaning into all these ordinances to regular society, God said to them, so I want you to build now a sanctuary or a place of gathering where you can maintain that flame of spirituality and flame of connection with each other. You can maintain it for the generations. And in order to do that, you have to build a temple. But you know what? This is what God said. I'm not going to give you the temple as a miracle, because God could have done that the same way that God sent, for example, the manna in the desert, the same way that God sent this miraculous quail that came from heaven so they could eat, or God sent this miraculous cloud to protect the Jewish people, right? He said, nope, that's not the way we are going to do it. You have to build it. All of you will have to build that temple. In order to build the temple, you're going to need money. You're going to need money. You're going to need different materials. You're going to need an architect. You're going to need artists. And you have to put it all together, and you have to do it. But the reward for doing that is that you're going to keep that those experiences mentioned in the past two parshiot alive for the generations. So it looks like people understood that, and they donated very generously. They gave everything so they could preserve that experience. It's something that sometimes we forget, because somebody knocks at our door and asks money for the synagogue, and we don't see the point. Why would I give money to the synagogue? Do I really need the synagogue? But the answer is yes. Maybe you don't need it right now, but you never know. Because the synagogue is not just something for services that we're going to see, hopefully today during the class. It's much more than that. Okay? But again, I'm going to start with the class now, but I want you to see that sequence from spiritual to human interaction to the need of money to make the other two possible. Okay? So let's get into it. And I would like to show you a few verses from this Parsha where God says that we need the sanctuary, but we also need some material things to make that happen. So let's get to it. And I have it here. And you can see it's almost at the beginning. It is actually at the beginning of the Parsha. It goes like this. Vezot ha-teruma. And this is the offering which you shall receive from them: gold, silver, and bronze. This is almost like cash, checks, and credit cards. If I will have to translate the Bible today, that's probably what I will use. Never mind. So, but back in the day, gold, silver, and bronze. Then they also need blue and purple and red stuff and fine twined linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, goat skins, acacia wood, oil for the lamps, spices for the anointing oil, and for the fragrant incense, onyx stones and gemstones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece. Those were themed for the priests, by the way. And let them make me a sanctuary, and I may dwell in their midst. Okay? So this is very interesting. This is the commandment of things they have to bring in order to create a sanctuary, so God could be there. Which actually brings many questions. Okay? This brings many questions. Number one is the concept of creating a place or creating a space for God here on earth. This is more clear in the next, I believe it's the next parsha, when the tabernacle was completed, and the description of what happened there is very interesting. I will bring it to you. This is from Exodus 40, and it says that the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So there is in the Torah, there is the implication, there is the idea of the fact that it is possible to create a space here on earth for God to dwell. Amparo Goldman, welcome to the class. Boker Tov to you too. Okay, so this is a very interesting concept, because this is something that seems to be impossible. How can you create a space on earth for God? And why is that a problem? Let me give you a couple of philosophical points here. God is infinite. Earth is finite. How can you put something that is infinite into something that is finite? Seems to be impossible. Philosophically and mathematically, it is impossible to put infinite inside something that is finite. Okay? But nevertheless, you read the verses from this week's Parsha, and you just read the verse here in Exodus 40 that it says that the glory of God filled the tabernacle, and it seems to imply that the glory of God was not there before. That's the thing, because you can tell me, no. God is everywhere. So if God is everywhere, of course, God's going to be in the sanctuary as well. But it implies here that God wasn't there until this cloud covered the tent of meeting. And at that point, they could say that the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Okay? Hello, Judy Shrek. Good afternoon to you. Be a very cold day. But I hope it's warm where you are right now and enjoying the class. You can also do like me. A little coffee for the class. So you can have Torah, you can have coffee. If it's a good espresso, even better. If you're having coffee now, let me know what's your favorite coffee is. I would like to know. Just use the chat. I'm a coffee aficionado. I love coffee, but I like good coffee. Big part of my budget is just to get good coffee. So I would like to know if you are like me or not. Okay, so back to the Parsha. this question that I ask you is not new. It's not new. It's not even modern. It's something that even Scripture itself questions the statement of Exodus 40. For example, King Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem. It was something that was envisioned by David, but he couldn't do it, so Solomon did it, okay? And Solomon, we all know Solomon. He was a wise man. He was probably a philosopher, and he asked questions. And the question that he asked about the temple was, but will God really dwell on earth? Even the heavens, to their uttermost riches, cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built? So Solomon could not understand Exodus 40. Okay? And of course, Solomon couldn't understand Exodus 25. How is it possible? Even though Solomon was the one who built it, he still couldn't comprehend the concept of God residing on a physical address, so to speak. And then we all know that once the temple was in place, people from all over the Middle East used to have these pilgrimage moments when they will go to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices in the temple. Why? Because that was God's place of residence. And I can't imagine, because it will take lots of imagination for us, lots of undoing of our bias and our culture, to try to feel what people felt back then, that they have this concept that the presence of God was stronger in Jerusalem, in the temple, than it was outside the temple and outside Jerusalem or outside Israel. You know what I mean? It's almost like in these days, we have somehow a concept that God is equally present everywhere. But the Parsha seems to imply otherwise. Seems to imply that God was shining, let's put it this way, shining brighter in Jerusalem and in the temple. Okay, so how is that possible? So I wanted to share with you some comments from different rabbis talking about this specific matter. And I would like to hear your opinions as well. Again, the chat is open. If you want to share with me your opinion, start typing in the chat and I will read it. Okay? So they were talking about this apparent contradiction of God being infinite, but God saying, build the place and I will be there. Okay? So let's start now with the Midrash. Midrash Pesikta Rabbati. And it goes like this. Hi Shelly, welcome. It's like this. It is written there, and again, I'm quoting now what I just read for you, right? The two sources, the one from Solomon and the one from Exodus. It says there, even the heavens to their uttermost riches cannot contain you. Okay? And here it is written, the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Now the explanation from the Midrash. Rabbi Yehoshua of Sachnin said in the name of Rabbi Levi, to what is this likened? To an open cave at the edge of the sea. When the sea storms, the cave is filled, but the sea is not reduced. So too, even though it is written that the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, the upper and lower world did not lose anything of the brilliance of the glory of the Holy One. Okay? So this is very interesting because it answers the question but only partially. All what it says here is, yeah, it is possible for God to find a place in this world without altering God's essence in heaven. That's it. But it still doesn't answer the question of, wait, hold on a minute. Wasn't God there already? Isn't God everywhere right now? Why do we need to build a special place if we already know that God is everywhere? So Peter, let's see what he says here. Peter said, God's presence is everywhere, but his glory is present where people appreciate his glory. That's a very, very good point. Very good point. So in other words, what you say is we need a specific place where we can actually remember that God is everywhere. But we still don't understand why it has to be done in one single place. Maybe there was something cultural about it, because we all know that the Torah speaks on people's language. So the Torah was written in a way that it makes sense for the generation who received the Torah, but then it's up to us to read the Torah again and to learn the general principle and then reapply those principles to our lives, right? So, but that's a good point, to have a place where we can remember that God exists and God is everywhere, but we need the temple to do that. That is a very, very good point. Very good point. Any other comments? So, also something similar appears in a book that is called Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer HaChinuch is a book listing and explaining a little bit of each one of the 613 commandments contained in the Torah. A quick recap: in Judaism, we have 613 commandments that they can be found in the Torah. That's called halacha deoraita, which means law from the Torah. And we can find 613 places in the Torah where we can learn a piece of law, or in other words, that we can learn the will of God and we can understand what we need to do. This affects only to the Jewish people. For people who are not Jewish, they have to fulfill only 7 laws, what is called the 7 laws of Noah. But in the Torah, we have 613 commandments. Then in the Talmud, we have thousands more. But Sefer HaChinuch is talking about only those 613 commandments found in the Torah, and they are explained, and this book is explaining a little bit of each one of them. Okay? So it was written in Spain in the 13th century, and I'm going to read it in a minute, but we have a couple of comments here. Let's see. Holly, what do you say? He said, is the glory of the Lord the same of the Lord himself? Good question. Good question, because as you mentioned there, it's not talking about the presence of God, it's talking about the glory of God. It seems to be some kind of manifestation of God, but we don't know exactly what it is, so it is an excellent question. But it is not necessary. Yeah, it is the same of God himself, but it's not at the same time. It's like using different names of God to refer to God, because we know that every different name we use will talk about different attributes of God. But it doesn't mean that they are different gods. It's all the same God, but sometimes the name that we use helps us to understand something different about that God. Well, this is the same thing. Every time we talk about the glory of God, it will talk about one aspect of God, not necessarily about other aspects of God, but it doesn't mean that the other aspects don't exist. It's just that we are not talking about those aspects at this specific time. So yeah, it's very confusing. So I understand why you think that way, but it is. So when we say the glory of God, we are talking about the presence of God, but in a very specific way. Shelley, what do you say? Let me read your text. Because we are surrounded by his glories everywhere, we take them for granted. So we need a special place to focus, concentrate our attention. Yeah, that's correct. But but again, it still doesn't explain why it has to be one single place and one in Jerusalem. Okay, I don't think we can answer that question. I think it's virtually impossible to understand for us in these days. Okay, so yeah. So let's read now the Sefer HaChinuch, what it says about this is actually the mitzvah, the commandment number 95. You know which one is the commandment 95? To build the temple. God said, when you come to the land that I will give you, there will be a place that I'm going to appoint, and there you have to build the temple. It's right. It's one of the commandments, 613 commandments. It does not apply to these days anymore because we don't. But the commandment is there, so that's why it's funny. 613 commandments, but most of them we cannot do it anymore, either because we are not in Israel or because there is no temple, there are no priests, there are no kings. One of the commandments is the kings should not have many horses, but we don't have a king anymore, so that kind of commandment cannot be fulfilled anymore. So 613, but really not really, not 613, they are less from the Torah. But remember, we have way more from the Talmud. Those we still have to do. Let's read this. To build a house for the name of God, that means that we should be bringing our sacrifices to God there. Okay? That is the commandment. To build a house for the name of God, so that we should be bringing our sacrifices to God there. The underlying purpose of this precept is, let's see. Know, my son, that God gets nothing from a person of servants of the commandments, and it is only that God's desire to benefit us. And when the person will be prepared and readied through the performance of those commandments to receive God's benefits, then God will indeed provide the individual with it. This is a very interesting concept, and I mentioned this before, that the observance of the commandments is not for God's sake, it's for our sake. Okay? It's a very easy concept. God knows us, God knows what we need, and God gave us all these commandments, and every commandment will affect a different aspect of our being. So the proper observance of the commandments will have a beneficial action in our lives. So for example, Sefer HaChinuch will say, okay, the temple will have a benefit, but not for God, but for us. Okay? How is that? Let's keep reading. There is one passage in the Torah which outlines this principle. It says, "Now, O Israel, what does God require of you?" And then it continues, blah, 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 and it ends by saying, "For your own good." Okay, so everything that God is requiring from us is for our own good. In other words, God only requires you to perform His commandments because this is in your best interest. Note what follows. Look, the heavens and heavens of heavens are the Lord your God's, the earth and all that is therein. In other words, God does not need your performance. It was only God's love for you that prompted God to do you a good turn. So similarly, the building of a house in God's name and our performance therein of acts of prayer and sacrifice was to put us in the right frame of mind. Oh, this sounds so modern. In these days, every guru and every life coach out there is going to use words as mindset. Have you ever heard that word, mindset? You have to change your mindset and your future is going to change. Well, how do you change your mindset? Easier said than done. Well, this is what Sefer HaChinuch is saying. The temple was designed to change your mindset. Let's keep reading. And then we are going to talk about this. This is pure gold. Okay? What's to put us in the right frame of mind to worship God, not because God needs to dwell among people. Were we to build it of cedars or cypresses, it would not suffice, for the heavens and the upper heavens cannot contain God. So in other words, it doesn't really matter we used to build a temple. Doesn't matter. There is nothing magic out there. whatever you use from this world to build a temple, it won't magically attract God, because God cannot be contained in anything, right? So, because it said, if the heavens cannot contain God, how much less a house built by mortals? Far be it. But it is the impact on ourselves which is important. Repeated actions make their impact on body and mind, purifying both. God wishes to promote the benefit of God's creatures. That is why God commanded us to set aside a place of the highest purity, there to purify people's thought and refine our character. Karen, what I said, does that include all the offerings at the temple? Well, yeah, all the offerings, all the sacrifices and everything. The whole idea, according to this, is to create something on the people who were performing those acts. And again, the temple, this is what I believe. This is what I believe. The temple, the sacrifices, the animals and everything makes sense back then. Okay? It makes sense. There were people that was the only way they knew that a human being can connect to a divine being. It's easy for us to judge. But back in the day, civilization didn't know other way. So I think it was brilliant to do a couple of things. Number one, to concentrate everything in one place. Okay, they would say, God, you need a temple? You cannot understand that God is everywhere? Fine. But I won't allow you to do these kind of things everywhere you want. It's going to be only one in Jerusalem. And that actually kind of worked. Because when the temple was destroyed, we didn't run to build temples anywhere else. That was actually, I believe, when we started to evolve philosophically into really starting to understand that God was everywhere. So there is a kind of a master plan on why only one temple at the beginning, because then it was easier to, once the temple wasn't there anymore, to convince people that God was everywhere. Peter, you have a comment. Let me highlight it here so we can read it together. The temple was where His holiness was greatest, according to Isaiah. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Yeah, but it's something that I think it has to do with, of course, architecture, and what that experience will allow people to feel. Everything in the temple was designed in such way that it will awaken that sense of God's holiness into the participants of the rituals. And this is something that any architects in history that actually built, not just a synagogue, a church, a mosque, you name it, a Hindu temple, you name it. Every architect will have that in mind. How can I create something that it will inspire worshippers to perceive the sanctity, the holiness, and the greatness of my God? It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And I believe the temple fulfilled the same thing. It was such a beautiful architectural masterpiece, and the ritual was so carefully crafted that it helped the worshippers to have an experience. It's not, I don't think it's that difficult to understand. We do it the same with services in these days. So now it's not just the architecture that will inspire people, it's also what we do in the service, the kind of sound we have, the kind of visuals that we have, the kind of language we use. And we are aware of that, because what we want is to preserve that feeling, the feeling of the presence of God is here. Yeah. Shelley, you say they infuse us with a sense of awe and wonder. Correct. Yeah, that's what I believe it happened. Absolutely. 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 Um, Now, if you see, hold on a minute, I want to see here. Um, so you see, but if you go back to the beginning, you will see. Let me read again. At the very end, it says it very clear. Sometimes we read it so fast that we miss the point. That it says, "Va'asuli mikdash v'shachanti vetocham," and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell in their midst. God doesn't necessarily say here that God was going to live in the sanctuary. He said, make me a sanctuary and I will live inside you. In other words, the sanctuary is going to be the key that is going to unlock your ability, your capability to feel my presence inside your life. That's a tall order. And the temple excelled to do that. But for a while, you will see, actually, is in scripture, is in historical research, that by the end, especially the second temple, the concept of sacrifice and the one temple in Jerusalem, it didn't work anymore. It didn't work anymore. It was kept there, but you see, you will read about corruption among priests and other things, because I believe that the experience itself didn't serve its purpose anymore. It's a fact. Shelley, what do you say? I will read another thing. Speaking for myself, I had the same feeling flooding over me every time I went to pray at the Eastern Wall in Jerusalem. Yeah, but it's I believe it's because of all you were told about the place that help you develop that mindset. That if you put somebody there who is unaware of what that was, of what that represents, is that person going to have the same experience that you had? Probably not. Because it's a whole. You can't just separate it from the whole, from the concept, from the philosophy of having a place to connect you with God. Okay? So, yeah. Now, we all know that the temple was destroyed. Twice, actually. What we call the destruction of the first temple and the second temple. First time were the Babylonians, second time were the Romans. And they were both very traumatic for the Jewish people. I will say the first one, in a sense, was even more traumatic, because when the first temple was destroyed, people didn't know what to do. Is there an alternative? Can you be a Jew without a temple? Nothing in the Torah. The Torah doesn't say, that we don't have a section in the Torah said, when the temple will be destroyed, this is what you're going to do. No, it's taken as a given that the temple will be always there and we will be able to present sacrifices. So what do we do now? Well, that's when rabbinic Judaism started to become more prominent, because now we have the rabbis rereading the Torah between lines and trying to extract the principles from that physical temple that is not there anymore. And they realize that they need an alternative. They probably realize that the alternative cannot become another place that is just one single place. And that's how the concept of synagogue started. Synagogues, plural actually, because they became popular everywhere. It wasn't just one place. It wasn't just that you had to go to Jerusalem to the synagogue. Whatever city the Jews were, they had their own synagogues. They were places of worship, but also places of gathering. That's what the synagogue was, but it was an alternative. And the idea was to transform that synagogue into a place that can trigger the same kind of feelings, that can put you in the same mindset that the temple may have put you back in the day. Okay? Now, this concept of synagogue wasn't necessarily unchallenged. There were doubts if that was, believe it or not, in these days, if the concept of synagogue was kosher. Is it good enough to have the synagogue? Is it valid? Does God listen to us in the same way if we are praying in the synagogue? Well, the Talmud talks about that. So, for example, Ravin, son of Rav Ada, in the name of Rabbi Isaac, declared, "From where do we know that the Holy One, blessed is He, is present in a synagogue?" Okay, is God present in a synagogue? What they said, he said yes, and he was asked, "Well, show me proof." And I said, "Okay, since it is written in the Psalms, God stands amidst the congregation of the Lord." So what he said, wherever, doesn't matter the place, wherever there is a congregation, later on this is going to be translated as Minyan, at least 10 adults. This is where the concept comes from, because the scripture keep talking about congregation. So the rabbis, they needed to discuss how many people is a congregation. So the answer, long story short, 10. Okay? So, and from there, we have now the concept of synagogue as a replacement for the temple. But then you see all the other aspects surrounding the temple should apply also to the synagogue. In the same way that the people of Israel had to bring all these donations to support the temple, now the rabbi said people of Israel should, and it's a mitzvah, it's a commandment, they should collaborate, they should donate to their local synagogues. It's a mitzvah, it's a commandment. Sometimes we lost that kind of concept. We believe that because, at least in North America, it evolves into some kind of membership. You're a member of the synagogue and you donate or pay a membership. But I believe the concept of membership is so foreign to the essence of the synagogue. There was no membership for the temple. People understood the need, and people brought donations because they understood it. There was no membership back then. It was all calculated, by the way, if you want to explore further. The way it used to be is after these initial donations to build it, it used to be like 10% of their income, which still happens in many, I believe, evangelical churches. I don't know if Roman Catholics of other denominations will do the same thing. The tithing, tithing is big, the thing, but they didn't invent it. It's coming from all this. It's coming from the Old Testament, from the Hebrew Bible, the concept of supporting the house of worship. Yeah. Okay, so this is from the Talmud. Okay. Now let's jump ahead to the Middle Ages. Now the Rambam is going to try to rephrase this into a specific law for the Jewish people, to make it clear of what the synagogue is and what's our responsibility towards the synagogue. And the Rambam said, every place that has 10 or more Jews must prepare a house in which they will gather for prayer at all the appropriate prayer times. This place is called House of Gathering, Beit HaKnesset. And the townspeople can legally force each other to build a Beit HaKnesset and to buy a scroll of the Torah. Okay? Very interesting. So to have a synagogue and to support the synagogue in every city that has more than 10 Jews is halakha. It's Jewish law. You have to build a synagogue. You have to buy a Torah so the synagogue can function for every single service. Okay? Karen, you say, let's see. Was it men only who were counted then? Correct. That's correct. Only men at the time of the Talmud. Women were not counted because the idea behind it is that only people with the obligation to prayer can be counted. Women can pray if they want. If they don't want, they don't have the obligation. That's according to traditional Judaism. So they cannot be counted. That was the rationale. But every time the Talmud talks about 10 people, they're talking about 10 men above or over the age of bar mitzvah. In this day, conservative Judaism, when we talk about 10 people, we talk about male or female. It's like that. Okay? So I wanted to show you how the way we build our synagogues, it kind of mimics what used to happen at the temple in many ways. And I want to give you just here 4 examples. You can probably add more to this list. If you have more examples, please let me know in the chat as I read this, okay? It says, the architecture of the synagogue parallels certain elements of the temple. Because again, it needs to awaken inside ourselves the same feelings. So it makes sense. It makes sense. So, number one, and the most important one, and the most, and sometimes is the most, we don't even pay attention to that, is the eternal light, also called Ner Tamid. Doesn't matter which synagogue you go around the world, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, you can always find a lamp somewhere, usually in the center. If you look up to the ceiling, it will be there, which is reminiscent of the fire on the altar in the temple, that it was never extinguished. There is a commandment in the Torah that said you have to keep that fire burning all the time, and that was for the priests. Okay, so we don't have the temple anymore, but the concept of this, eternal light, still there in every single synagogue. So when you go to the Shari Zedek, for example, we have it there, and if you shut all the lights of the sanctuary, that one will still be on. I don't even know where the switch is to shut that off, but it's always there. Always there. The other thing that's always also pretty obvious is the Torah Ark. And this is reminiscent of the Ark that held the tablets containing the 10 Commandments that was kept in the Holy of Holies. So remember, there was this portable Ark with the cherubs there. It was beautiful. It was made of gold, and it would go from place to place when they were in the desert. In fact, we still sing it in the synagogue every Shabbat. Vayehi vinso Aaron vayomer Moshe. So it was in the days where the ark used to move. Moses said, what were the days where the ark used to move? Well, when the ark was portable. This ark that contains the tablets. Also, when the Torah was finished, at the end of Moses' life, it was put there. They also kept there a jar with manna as a testimony for future generations. The broken tablets, the one that Moses broke, were also there. And then there was this, I believe that was Aaron's staff that produced almonds. Remember, with this challenge, I believe is there. I can't remember. There is a list of everything that was kept inside that ark. In these days, we build the ark in the synagogue. We keep the scrolls of Torah inside, but it's reminiscent of that ark that they used to have at the temple. Then also, the podium in the middle, that is usually only in Orthodox synagogues, although there are some conservative synagogues that they do the same, is reminiscent of the altar in the middle of the courtyard. Makes sense. And the other one is the mechitza, right? It is only in Orthodox synagogues, reminiscent of the separate men's and women's section in the temple. These are two different sections. So, yeah. Karen, you said it's like a time capsule. Yeah, that's what it was. The first ark. Everything was kept there. The problem is we don't know where the ark is anymore. It was lost. Although the Ethiopians will tell you that they have it, but we cannot prove that. And even if we can prove it, we cannot open it. And if you watch Indiana Jones, you know what happened if you try to open it. You're gonna melt. Remember that part, the Nazi melting when they open it? Actually, kind of enjoying part. Looking at the Nazis melting for opening the ark. You all said, good, well deserved. But yeah, so if you know any other things that we have in the synagogue that represent something that it was at the temple, please let me know in the chat. I will be curious to add more things to my list. Okay, and although, for example, some of the things that we see in the Torah itself, the fact that the Torah has a belt and a cover, it represents also the clothing of the high priest. And the crown of the Torah, it's kind of the same thing, of the plate that represent what the priests used to wear with the stones and things. So there are many other things. Some of the arcs also represent the Ten Commandments on top, right? Clyde, welcome. You say, why can't we open it? Well, because we are not a high priest anymore. It was something that even at the time of the temple, nobody will open it. Nobody will open it. It will be, I believe it's only the high priest if it was, but it was just kept intact. Nobody will dare to open it. This ark. Even the place where the ark was used to be accessed just by the high priest once a year for Yom Kippur. That's it. So the priest will have a chance to look at the ark from the outside once a year for Yom Kippur. Yeah, Jerome, you say according to the Bible, you touch it, you die. How? We don't know. It was a magical thing. It was a magical thing. Yeah. So, and again, let me. I want to bring to you some texts that they will tell you how important it is, now that we don't have a temple, to have synagogues and to support the synagogue. For example, even the Talmud. Reish Lakish says, whoever has a synagogue in his town but does not go there in order to pray is considered to be an evil neighbor. In other words, because we all know that, you could pray at home. You don't need a minyan. You could just buy, you can buy a Siddur, a prayer book on Amazon, or I don't know, any Judaica, and you can pray at home every day. With the Rabbi said that's fine, but if you have a synagogue and if you have access to a synagogue, you are being evil if you stay at home to pray. Why? Well, I believe that is the sense of you are favoring comfort over community. Because the reason with more people will tell you that they prefer to stay at home to pray is because they feel that they can pray better at home than if you go to synagogue. You have people chatting and the sound is bad, it's too cold or too hot, the pews are hard. Look, I'm at home, it's my place, it's very quiet, I have nobody during the day, so I prefer to stay and pray at home. So the rabbis will say, well, you are, that's true, there is an element of quality there that you want to have it at the synagogue, but nevertheless, supporting a congregation is preferable over that added quality to your own prayers, in the sense that God knows what you need. It's not that if you stay at home and you pray in a place that is more silent, God would listen to you, otherwise God wouldn't listen to you. God knows. And the little sacrifices that we do in order to pray with a minyan or in a synagogue is rewarded by God. And that's the concept here. And now this again, when the synagogues were closed because of COVID or whatever, and some people said, no, I don't like the online thing. I'm not feeling comfortable. Well, it's still important to join a congregation. It's an extension of the synagogue. And I understand sometimes the experience is not the same, but just you have to understand that God knows what you need. It's not that if you don't say it in the proper setting, God wouldn't hear your prayer. Thinking that way about God is limiting God so much that I feel uncomfortable with that concept. I believe that God knows everything and God rewards our actions. So one of the actions is joining a minyan. If sometimes make us that our feeling that we pray in the best conditions is not the same, well, trust in God. Trust in God a little bit. Yeah. Now, and there is one more thing that I want to tell you today, and then this is going to be the last thing, that there is one more place. One more place. Oh, hi, Andrea. Good to know that you were there. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful day. And there is another thing. That is also the Beit Midrash. So when the temple was destroyed, we have the Beit HaKnesset, the synagogue, but we also have the Beit Midrash, house of study. Okay? And according to some rabbis, for example, Maimonides, they would say that Beit Midrash is greater or is better in the Beit HaKnesset. And the great sages, even though they had many synagogues in their cities, only prayed in the places where they studied Torah. That is, when a community of Minyan prayed there. So basically, Beit HaMidrash is something that is not pretty as the synagogue. Everything in the synagogue is about aesthetics, right? It's like the temple. But the Beit Midrash is basically a place where Jews go there to study. And then all of a sudden, oh, it's time for the afternoon prayers, okay? Let's stop studying, everybody. Let's pray together. They do a service. Service is over. They go back to study. Okay? And according to Maimonides, that setting is preferable over just the synagogue. Most cities, they have both. They have both. Usually Beit Midrash is more, it's even many places that we think that is an Orthodox synagogue, in reality, most of the time is a Beit Midrash, where it was designed for studying. And then they also have services whenever necessary, but it was not necessarily designed for services. And that's the difference, but I wanted to mention to you that is also another option for Jews. So in these days, we have only two options, Beit Midrash and Beit HaKnesset. If we have the chance, we should go there for our prayers, not just to stay home and do it by ourselves. Okay? So, thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this Torah L'Chaim. Remember, this class is going to be restreamed tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to our channel. And once you subscribe, please hit the bell so you will be notified every time we go live or every time we upload something to our channel. Give us a thumbs up. Hit the thumbs up on YouTube or Facebook. And feel free to share this class with your friends. Let them know that we get together every Thursday at noon Central Time to study a little bit of Torah. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. My name is Rabbi Anibal. I'm the spiritual leader of this wonderful congregation, Congregation Shaarei Zedek. We are located in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and I hope one day we can see each other in person. Until that day, stay safe. Have a wonderful day. Hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.